Welcome back. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And if you're already wrapped up somewhere soft, tell me in the comments where in the world you are and what time it is where you're sitting. I love knowing that people all over the world are all settling in together at wildly different hours, all listening to a story about a dog. Not just any dog, but one that exhibits the contrast of both elegance and speed in one gorgeous body. Picture this. You're sitting in a park on a Tuesday afternoon, minding your own business, when something absolutely rockets past you at the edge of your vision. You turn your head and there it is, a medium-sized dog with a chest like a barrel and a waist like a wasp, ears folded back flat, legs churning in that strange, suspended gallop where all 4 feet leave the ground at once, and it has completely, utterly, 100% stopped registering that you exist because there's a squirrel somewhere across the field. That squirrel made a tactical error, and this dog, this impossibly elegant, almost architectural dog, is going to cover 200 yards of open grass in less than 10 seconds. Don't even bother trying to get his attention. That dog is a Whippet. And honestly, watching one run is one of those things that recalibrates your understanding of what a dog's body is capable of. The Whippet in full flight looks less like a pet and more like a physics demonstration. Now is the time to dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight we're going to follow the Whippet from its deep, deep roots in ancient dog history, through the smoky industrial towns of northern England where coal miners bred it and raced it and loved it fiercely, through the gilded world of competitive dog shows, out onto the lure-coursing fields, and the dock-diving docks where Whippet owners and their dogs are having what appears to be the time of their lives, and then back into the living room where this same animal that just outran a pigeon, and yes, that actually happened, is now taking up 2/3 of your sofa and showing absolutely no remorse. The Whippet is one of those breeds where the more you learn about it, the more you realize how complicated it is. It's simultaneously ancient and modern, aristocratic and working class, explosive and lazy, deeply affectionate and completely, serenely indifferent to your commands when something interesting is happening at a distance. It is, depending on which day you catch it, the best dog in the world and also an absolute menace. And Whippet owners will tell you both those things in the same breath, with the expression of someone whose dinner was just stolen but doesn't actually mind. Let's start at the very beginning, which, for Whippets, is a complicated question. The official breed history typically places the Whippet's origins in 19th century England, which is technically accurate, but also the kind of answer that leaves out about 5,000 years of context. Because while the modern Whippet as a distinct, recognized breed really did emerge in the industrial north of England during the Victorian era, the type of dog it represents, the slender, long-legged, deep-chested hunter that catches prey using its eyes and its speed, not its nose, is genuinely, impressively old. The sighthound body, that characteristic S-shaped silhouette with the tucked-up belly and the arched loin and the long legs built for covering ground, has existed in dogs for at least 4,000 to 5,000 years that we can document, and likely longer. The earliest confirmed remains of a sighthound, discovered at the Telbrak excavation site in what is now Syria, date to approximately 4,000 years ago. They belong to a dog about the size of a Saluki. And on the tomb walls of ancient Egypt, in paintings that are anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 years old, there are dogs. Lean, narrow-headed, elegant dogs that look remarkably familiar if you've ever owned a Whippet. Historians and archaeologists have identified what appear to be several distinct dog types in ancient Egyptian art, including the Basenji, the Greyhound, the Saluki, the Afghan Hound, the Pharaoh Hound, and yes, among them, dogs that are Whippet type. These dogs appear in hunting scenes and in domestic scenes, often sitting near or beneath the chairs of their owners, which, if you know Whippets, is completely on brand. Now, historians still argue whether any of these ancient Egyptian dogs are genuinely ancestral to the modern Whippet in a direct genetic line, or whether they simply represent the same adaptive body plan arriving independently in different places and times, because slender and fast is just a very good solution to the problem of catching a hare on open ground. The sighthound shape keeps appearing across millennia and continents because it works, which suggests either that ancient breeds traveled far and wide and spread their genes across the ancient world, or that humans repeatedly and independently landed on the same elegant design through selective breeding or some combination of both. The honest answer is that we don't entirely know, and the dogs in the Egyptian tomb paintings are too far removed from the 19th century Whippet to trace a clean line. What we can say is this: the dog that would eventually become the Whippet is part of a family, the sighthound family,
That is one of the oldest and most distinctive groupings in the entire history of domestic dogs. That family includes the Greyhound, the Saluki, the Afghan Hound, the Borzoi, the Galgo Español, the Italian Greyhound, the Irish Wolfhound, the Scottish Deerhound, and a dozen other breeds that share that same fundamental design philosophy. Long legs, deep chest, narrow waist, keen eyesight, and an absolutely unshakable commitment to going very, very fast when something starts moving at the edge of their vision. The Whippet sits comfortably in the middle of this family, size-wise and temperament-wise, and it shares more traits with its sighthound relatives than it differs from them. And here's a genuinely charming quirk that tells you a lot about how the Whippet came to be. The first written use of the word whippet to describe a dog appeared in English in 1610. But that first reference was actually describing a Greyhound Spaniel mix, not the breed we know today at all. So the Whippet doesn't even technically own its own name in the earliest historical record. That's the kind of origin story that feels right for a breed that has, from day one, been slightly underestimated and then proceeded to win everything anyway. So we've established that the sighthound family is ancient, that dogs resembling the Whippet were painted onto Egyptian tomb walls thousands of years ago, and that the name Whippet was initially assigned to a completely different dog by someone who clearly wasn't paying close enough attention. What we haven't gotten to yet is the specific, wonderfully English story of how the actual modern Whippet came to exist. And that story involves coal mines, rabbit enclosures, Saturday afternoons, and a class of working men who couldn't afford a Greyhound, but were absolutely not going to let that stop them from having the fastest dog in the neighborhood. To understand the Whippet's true origins, you need to understand a bit about what life looked like in the industrial north of England in the late 1700s and early 1800s. The Industrial Revolution had pulled enormous numbers of people into English cities and mill towns. These were not comfortable places to live. The work was grinding and relentless. 12-hour shifts in coal mines or textile mills, 6 days a week, with Sunday and the occasional Saturday afternoon as the only meaningful breathing room. Entertainment had to be cheap, local, and something you could argue about. Dog racing, in that context, was perfect. The specific breed that became the Whippet emerged from this environment, created by miners and mill workers who had very practical requirements. They needed a dog that was fast enough to be genuinely exciting to race and useful enough to catch rabbits for the pot, because supplementing the food budget was not a trivial concern for a working-class family in Victorian England. They needed a dog small enough to keep in a terraced house without it becoming a logistical problem. The solution they arrived at, through the kind of informal but effective selective breeding, was to take the runts and smaller specimens from Greyhound litters, cross them with quick game terriers, probably a now extinct long-legged terrier type found in the north of England, and breed them specifically for speed and agility. Later, once the dog fanciers of the upper classes got involved, small Italian Greyhounds were bred in, partly to refine the look and give the breed that particularly fine-boned, aristocratic quality that characterizes the modern Whippet. The Italian Greyhound brought elegance. The terrier crosses brought something harder to name, a kind of scrappy tenacity, a gameness, an explosiveness that the pure Greyhound didn't always have in the same concentrated form. The result was a dog that weighed between 20 and 40 pounds, stood about 18 to 22 inches at the shoulder, and could reach 35 miles per hour from a standing start in a matter of seconds. For its size, the Whippet is the fastest domestic dog in the world. The Greyhound is faster overall, but pound for pound, inch for inch, nothing accelerates like a Whippet. They called this the poor man's racehorse, a nickname that captures exactly what it was and what it meant to the people who bred it. The poor man's racehorse. That phrase is not accidental and not unkind. It's a statement of genuine pride. Here's a creature of extraordinary speed and physical refinement that belongs not to aristocrats on country estates, but to men who come home with coal dust on their faces and holes in their boots. The Whippet was democratized speed, accessible grace, and the men who kept these dogs were fiercely, seriously attached to them. The primary racing format was called rag racing, and it was beautifully simple. 2 dogs would be held at a starting line by their handlers while their owners stood at the finish line, usually about 200 yards away, waving pieces of cloth or flannel. The dogs were trained to race toward those rags, toward that specific waving motion, and at the signal, the boom of a starting pistol. The handlers would literally launch the dogs forward, lifting them by the collar and the base of the tail and throwing them bodily in the direction of the finish line, trying to give their dog the tiniest possible edge of stride or position. Cash prizes at these Saturday afternoon meetings could amount to a full week's wages. The atmosphere was noisy, opinionated, and extremely invested, and the Whippet was the undisputed champion of the format. No other breed of comparable size came close. In the north of England, two slightly distinct varieties of Whippet developed alongside each other. One had a smooth, short coat and was more popular in Lancashire and Yorkshire in the Midlands. This is the type that eventually became the recognized modern Whippet. The other had a rougher coat because of crossbreeding with Bedlington Terriers and was more common in Durham and Northumberland, where it was often called the rabbit dog. These two varieties competed alongside each other for decades before the smoother-coated type became dominant as the breed was formalized and standardized. Because here's the thing about the Whippet in its early days. It was entirely a working-class animal, bred entirely for function, which meant that nobody particularly cared what color it was or whether its markings were symmetrical. You look at the range of colors and patterns in today's Whippets. Solids, brindles, part-eye colors, blue, fawn, red, cream, black, white. Every combination imaginable. And that variety is a direct legacy of the fact that early Whippet breeders were focused exclusively on performance. The American Kennel Club's breed standard, to this day, simply states that color is immaterial. There is no such thing, officially, as a bad color for a Whippet. The breed crossed the Atlantic when English mill workers emigrated to the United States in the second half of the 19th century, bringing their dogs with them. The first Whippet populations in America were established in Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, and rag racing caught on in the new country with the same enthusiasm it had generated in the old one. By the time the American Kennel Club recognized the Whippet in 1888, 3 years before the English Kennel Club formally recognized it in 1891, which is a fact the Americans have presumably never let the British forget, the breed had already established itself as a genuine presence on both sides of the ocean.
So by the late 19th century, the Whippet has a name, a breed standard, official recognition on both sides of the Atlantic, and a deeply working-class identity that it wears like a badge of honor. What happens next is one of those fascinating moments in dog breed history where a single animal gets picked up by two completely different worlds simultaneously, and both worlds claim it as their own for completely different reasons, and they are both, in their own way, absolutely right. On one side, you have the racing community. The miners and mill workers and their Saturday afternoon crowds, including the serious betting men who could look at a dog moving at full stretch and tell you within a few strides whether it had the particular combination of reach and drive and turning ability that separated a good racer from a great one. These people knew Whippets from the inside out in the practical, unsentimental way that comes from decades of hands-on breeding and competing. On the other side, you have the emerging world of the Victorian dog fancy. The kennel clubs and their confirmation shows, the wealthy enthusiasts who had spotted something in the Whippet that they found compelling from a purely aesthetic standpoint, and who began acquiring the best-looking examples from the racing world and breeding them selectively toward an ideal of physical perfection that was, in their view, essentially a miniature Greyhound. Elegant, refined, proportionally perfect. The kind of dog you could put on a show lead and walk into a ring and have the judge go quiet for a moment just looking at it. These two visions of the Whippet, the explosive working dog and the aristocratic show dog, have coexisted, sometimes comfortably and sometimes in some tension, ever since. And one of the genuinely interesting things about the breed is that the best examples tend to satisfy both visions at once. A Whippet that moves beautifully in a show ring is often a Whippet that can also run. The breed standard is, unusually, quite functionally honest. It describes a dog built to do a specific physical thing, and if you breed toward the standard correctly, you get a dog that can actually do that thing. That's not always the case in the world of pedigree dogs, where the show ring has occasionally pulled breeds away from their working origins in ways that end up being bad for the dogs. The Whippet has largely, not entirely, but largely, escaped that particular trap. Now, let's talk about what actually makes a Whippet tick. Because understanding the Whippet's personality and behavior requires understanding one fundamental thing about sighthounds in general, and that thing is this. The prey drive in a sighthound is not like the prey drive in most other dogs. It is older, more deeply wired, and more completely immune to training than almost anything else in the canine behavioral repertoire. All dogs have some version of prey drive, the instinct to chase moving things inherited from their wolf ancestors who needed to hunt to survive. In most breeds, this drive has been modified, redirected, or partially suppressed through centuries of selective breeding for other purposes. A Labrador Retriever has prey drive, but it's been shaped into something cooperative. Find the bird, bring it back, deliver it to the human.
A border collie has prey drive, but it's been channeled into herding behavior, the stalk, the controlled chase, the responsiveness to the handler's direction. These are prey drives working in partnership with a human. A sighthound's prey drive is completely different. It was specifically bred to operate independently of the human. A hunting sighthound in the field would be released, slipped, and then expected to make its own decisions about how to pursue, turn with, and catch the quarry. There was no way for the human to stay involved once the chase started. The dog had to think for itself at 35 miles per hour, making split-second adjustments to a hare or rabbit that was also moving at high speed and changing direction unpredictably. This required a dog that could override its impulse to look back at the handler, that could subordinate everything. Every other input, every other instinct, including the very strong instinct to respond to its owner's voice, to the singular purpose of catching whatever it was chasing. That wiring does not disappear when you take the Whippet home and put it on your sofa. It goes dormant, temporarily, because Whippets are genuinely excellent at doing absolutely nothing when there's nothing exciting happening. But the moment something triggers it, a squirrel, a rabbit, a plastic bag blowing across the park, a cat that makes the mistake of running, that ancient, independently operating chase program boots up instantly and everything else goes offline. Your Whippets no longer recognizes his name. Your recall command that worked perfectly in the living room this morning, gone. Your frantic waving from the other end of the field. All of it is simply not accessible to the dog in that moment because the part of the brain that responds to those things has been temporarily replaced by something much older and much more urgent. This is not disobedience, and it's important to understand that because a lot of people get frustrated with Whippets and sighthounds generally for what looks like selective hearing. It is not selective hearing. The dog is not choosing to ignore you. The dog is, in the most literal neurological sense, not able to hear you because the chase sequence has fully engaged and everything else has been deprioritized in a way that no amount of training can completely overcome. You can manage it. You can train a Whippet to have excellent impulse control in normal circumstances and to recall reliably in most situations. But in the field, at full speed, with a real target in sight, most experienced Whippet owners are honest about the fact that their dog will not come back until it decides to come back. And the best strategy is a secure fence that is too high for your jumping champion. What Whippets are visually triggered by is movement, specifically fast, erratic movement. A squirrel sitting still on a fence post might barely register to a Whippet. That same squirrel dropping off the fence and bolting across open ground is a completely different situation. The eye catches it. The brain identifies the pattern. Small, fast, unpredictable, moving away. And the body is already in motion before anything like a conscious decision has been made. Whippet owners describe watching their dog go from completely relaxed to full sprint in what feels like zero time, because it effectively is zero time. There's no wind up, no warning, no gradual escalation. There is lying on the grass, and then there is 35 miles per hour and nothing in between. Now here's the joke that every Whippet owner has made at least once. You will spend considerable money on a top-quality dog lead, a well-fitted collar, possibly a specially designed sighthound harness, and an extremely robust fence. You will do all of this for a dog that spends approximately 18 of every 24 hours asleep. Because the other thing about the Whippet, the thing that makes it completely irresistible to live with despite the prey drive adventure, is that when nothing is moving, it is possibly the most profoundly relaxed animal on earth. Adult Whippets sleep the way some people only dream of sleeping. Deeply, completely, sprawled across every available surface, boneless with contentment. They are not restless. They don't pace. They don't bark at shadows or demand entertainment. They find a warm spot, ideally on something soft, ideally touching you, and they are simply unconscious. Gone. Resting in a way that approaches the philosophical. The on-off quality is one of the most frequently cited things by people who fall in love with the breed. Explosive speed outdoors, profound serenity indoors, and an almost complete absence of middle ground. Two speeds, 0 and 35 miles per hour. Nothing in between. And honestly, there's something deeply appealing about that. It's very honest, very clear. The Whippet is not a dog that manages its energy carefully or parcels it out in moderate doses throughout the day. It gives everything when it runs, and then it collapses into complete rest, and it does both with the same total commitment. Historians still argue whether the particular combination of explosive athleticism and domestic tranquility in Whippets was a deliberate breeding goal by the working-class men who developed the breed, or simply a happy accident arising from the practical constraints of keeping a fast dog in a small, terraced house. Either way, the result is a dog that has turned out to be surprisingly, remarkably adaptable to an enormous range of human living situations. We've talked about the Whippet's working-class roots, its ancient sighthound heritage, and the particular way its brain is wired around movement and chase. Now it's time to talk about what it's actually like to live with one of these dogs on a day-to-day basis, because the Whippet's personality is genuinely one of its most distinctive and most talked about qualities. And it is, in several ways, deeply surprising for a dog with such intense athletic ability. The first thing most people notice when they meet a Whippet in a domestic setting is how gentle it is. Not just calm, genuinely, constitutionally gentle. It approaches people with curiosity rather than boisterous enthusiasm, and it tends to express affection not through jumping and licking and general physical chaos, but through proximity, by simply finding you and being near you, leaning against your leg, resting its narrow head on your knee, curling up against your side on the sofa with the specific intention of being in contact with you. They are described by practically everyone who keeps them as Velcro dogs. Not in the yappy, anxious way that phrase sometimes implies, but in a more settled, companionable way. A Whippet wants to be where you are. It wants to be touching you when it sleeps. It will follow you from room to room, not frantically, but just steadily, moving with you through the house like a very elegant, very quiet shadow. If you stop, it stops. If you sit, it sits, preferably on you, or at least directly adjacent to you. There's something almost cat-like about the way Whippets manage their affection. Particular, deliberate, self-possessed. They choose their moments. They're not broadcasting love indiscriminately in all directions the way a golden retriever might. They're directing it specifically at you, and that specificity feels meaningful in a way that's hard to explain but very easy to feel. This quality makes them extraordinary companions for people who live alone, for older people, for people who work from home, for anyone who simply wants a dog that is genuinely present with them rather than demanding attention. They are also, perhaps surprisingly given their independent hunting heritage, quite emotionally sensitive. Whippets pick up on the moods of the people around them with a subtlety that can catch you off guard. If you're stressed, the Whippet will be quieter. If you're relaxed and happy, it will be more animated. They seem to be reading your mood and calibrating themselves to the emotional temperature of the household, which makes them excellent therapy dogs and psychiatric service dogs. A role they've taken on with considerable success because of exactly this quality of quiet, attentive companionship. The flip side of this sensitivity is that Whippets don't respond well to harsh handling. They are not a breed that bounces back cheerfully from being told off in a big voice or handled roughly in training. They take it personally. A Whippet that has been frightened or harshly corrected tends to shut down, to become hesitant, worried, unwilling to engage. And rebuilding that confidence takes patience and time. The most effective approach with Whippets is positive reinforcement, calm consistency, and a genuine respect for the fact that you are dealing with a dog that is both independent-minded and emotionally perceptive. You cannot bully a Whippet into compliance. You have to make compliance feel like a good idea, and that requires a certain flexibility of approach that new Whippet owners sometimes have to learn the hard way. The Whippet's relationship with furniture is another thing that comes up in approximately 100% of owner discussions. These dogs have very little natural padding. Their short, single-layer coat offers minimal insulation. Their body fat percentage is low, even by dog standards, and their skin over the hips and spine is thin. Hard surfaces are genuinely uncomfortable for them, which means a Whippet left to make its own decisions about where to sleep will make a beeline for the softest, warmest available surface in the house, which is almost always your sofa, your bed, your best armchair, or ideally all three in rotation. Most Whippet owners simply accept this as a condition of keeping the breed. Some try to establish rules. The general outcome, described with weary affection by Whippet owners everywhere, is that the dog ends up on the furniture regardless, and eventually you just buy a sofa in a color that matches your Whippet. They are also, it should be said, genuinely funny dogs, not in a clownish, performing way, but in a dry, situational way. A Whippet that has decided it wants something will pursue that goal with a quiet persistence that is both impressive and absurd. They are athletic enough to reach kitchen counters and survey the landscape for anything interesting. They can clear fences that their owners were confident would contain them. They have, when motivated by the presence of something they want, a problem-solving quality that can seem almost disproportionate in an animal that was asleep on the sofa just seconds ago. And they do all of this with an expression of such complete serenity, such total lack of guilt, that it is very difficult to be genuinely angry with them. You probably won't survive this next part, but here it is.
Whippet owners consistently report that their dog's most impressive acts of creative rule-breaking are performed with an expression of such calm innocence that the owners end up feeling like they are the ones who have done something wrong. One more personality trait worth dwelling on before we move forward. Whippets are almost universally described as not being good watchdogs. Not because they're unaware of their surroundings. Whippets are actually quite observant and will notice things you haven't, but because their response to noticing something is typically mild interest rather than alarm, and their response to a stranger at the door is more likely to be a wagging tail more than anything resembling protective behavior. One description, which I find extremely accurate based on everything I've read, notes that the greatest physical danger a Whippet poses to a visitor is its tail. When a Whippet is happy to see you, which it almost always is, the tail becomes a narrow, high-speed instrument of unintentional injury, capable of leaving red welts on the legs of anyone standing within range. As guard dogs go, they are, to put it charitably, decorative. As companions go, they are almost unmatched. So we have this dog, gentle, fast, funny, deeply affectionate, completely unreliable, off-leash near anything that moves, and fully committed to being on your furniture. What happens when you take that dog into the formal world of competitive dog shows? What happens when the breed that was born on a northern English racecourse, thrown forward by a coal miner's hands toward a waving rag, gets put on a show lead and walked into Madison Square Garden? What happens, it turns out, is that it wins. Quite a lot. The Whippet's relationship with the dog show world is a long and genuinely distinguished one, and it makes a certain kind of sense when you think about it. The show ring, at its best, is supposed to evaluate how closely a dog matches an ideal physical standard, how well its structure represents the functional blueprint of the breed. And the Whippet's blueprint is, by most accounts, one of the most elegant and coherent in the entire dog fancy. The breed standard describes a dog of symmetry and quality, with a series of flowing curves, the arch of the neck into the shoulder, the tuck of the abdomen, the curve of the loin, that together create that distinctive S-shaped silhouette. When a well-made Whippet moves, it moves with what judges describe as reach and drive, the front legs extending forward in a long, smooth stride, while the rear legs push powerfully from behind, the whole top line remaining level and firm, the overall impression being of effortless, ground-covering efficiency. It is, to put it plainly, beautiful to watch. Even people who don't follow dog shows and have no particular feeling about dog show judging tend to stop and look when a good Whippet goes around the ring. The Whippet has been winning at the highest levels of the dog show world since formal breed recognition in the late 19th century. In 1964, a Whippet named Utch. Courtenay Fleetfoot of Pennyworth won Best in Show at the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show, which is the oldest and most prestigious all-breed dog show in the United States, held annually in New York since 1877. That 1964 win was a significant moment for the breed. Westminster Best in Show winners tend to define public perception of a breed for years afterward, and Courtenay Fleetfoot put the Whippet firmly on the map in American dog culture. At Crufts, the British equivalent and arguably the most famous dog show in the world, Whippets have similarly made their mark. Whippets won Best in Show at Crufts 4 times, in 1964, 1992, 2018, and 2025. 4 Crufts Best in Show wins is a remarkable record for any breed, and it reflects the consistent quality that Whippet breeders have maintained over generations. But if you want to talk about a recent Whippet show career that genuinely captured the imagination of the dog show world, you need to talk about Whiskey. His full formal name was Pinnacle Tennessee Whiskey, and he was bred and owned and handled by Justin Smithy of Sugar Valley, Georgia. Whiskey was the #1 Whippet in the United States in both 2017 and 2018, and the #1 hound in the country in 2018. During his illustrious career, he won 22 all-breed Best in Show titles. The thing about Whiskey that people in the Whippet community still talk about is how he was described in the ring. Judges and commentators used words like effortless and exceptional and complete. Justin Smithy, his breeder-owner-handler, described Whiskey as having been born next to his bed, which is to say he was a homebred dog, whelped in the home, not purchased from another breeder, which makes the level of his success even more extraordinary. This was not a dog assembled from carefully acquired outside stock. This was a dog that Justin had bred himself from his own program and then campaigned to the top of the sport. And then Whiskey was succeeded in what has to be one of the most remarkable sibling stories in recent dog show history by his littermate sister, Bourbon. Her 108 all-breed Best in Show titles made her the top-winning female Whippet of all time.
Historians still argue whether any other litter in recent AKC history has produced two dogs of comparable individual achievement, and the general consensus is that it hasn't. The fact that a working-class dog from the northern English coalfields has, in the span of a century and a half, become a consistent winner at the most prestigious dog shows in the world is not, when you think about it, especially surprising. The Whippet was always built beautifully. Its breeders, from the miners who created the functional template to the upper-class fanciers who refined the look to the modern breeders who have spent generations perfecting both form and movement, have maintained a standard of quality that rewards serious evaluation. When a good judge looks at a good Whippet, they see a dog that makes sense from every angle. Every curve and proportion and measurement is there for a reason. There's no aesthetic extravagance, no feature that exists purely for appearance and serves no function. It is a design that works, and designs that work tend to be beautiful, and beautiful things tend to win shows. Whippets, with their characteristic combination of gentle confidence and social ease, tend to handle the show environment remarkably well. They're not flashy, excitable show-offs in the ring. They carry themselves with a kind of quiet dignity that reads under the lights as exactly what it is, a breed that is very comfortable in its own skin. That composure, combined with the movement and the silhouette, is what makes a great Whippet in the ring utterly compelling to watch. And while whiskey and bourbon were dazzling the judges in dog shows, something equally exciting was happening on the other side of the dog sport world, on fields and docks and tracks where Whippets were competing in ways that would have felt very familiar to the coal miners of County Durham, who first threw these dogs toward a waving rag 150 years ago. Here's something that surprises a lot of people who are new to the Whippet world. This breed is not used in commercial Greyhound-style racing. You will not find Whippets running at a track with professional handlers and betting windows and the whole elaborate infrastructure of the Greyhound racing industry. And actually, I'm happy to report that the world of commercial Greyhound racing is slowly being banned in states and countries all over the world. The Whippet, despite being one of the fastest dogs on earth and having a racing heritage that predates organized Greyhound racing in many ways, has stayed out of commercial racing. And this is not because Whippets lack the speed or the drive for it. It's because the people who love Whippets decided, a long time ago, that they preferred to race their dogs for fun rather than profit, and then take their Whippets home to sleep on their sofa. Nope, no commercial racing for Whippets. What they race for instead is ribbons and titles, and the specific, exhilarating pleasure of watching a dog do the thing it was literally born to do, at full speed, in a safe environment, with its whole heart in it. And they absolutely love it. The amateur racing scene for Whippets is genuinely vibrant, deeply community-oriented, and organized with the kind of passionate attention to detail that characterizes any hobby pursued by people who really, truly care. Straight racing is the format most directly descended from the original rag racing of the 19th century. Dogs run from starting boxes, like small individual compartments that spring open simultaneously, and chase an artificial lure, usually white plastic streamers or a wig, down a straight track of 150 to 200 yards. It is quick, it is clean, and it is absolutely nail-biting to watch because at that distance there is no room for strategy or tactics. It is purely, beautifully about which dog is faster. And then there is lure coursing, which is the sport that perhaps most completely satisfies the ancient, deep in the DNA drive that makes a Whippet a Whippet. Lure coursing was developed in the early 1970s by sighthound enthusiasts who had been hunting jackrabbits in open fields and wanted a safer, more controlled way to test their dog's coursing ability without using live game. The format involves an artificial lure, typically white plastic bags attached to a continuous line, pulled through a series of pulleys staked into the ground across an open field, operated by a motorized machine that the lure operator controls to keep the bags strategically placed just ahead of the running dogs. The course is typically between 600 and 1,000 yards in length, and it is not a straight line. It turns. It reverses direction. It goes up and down slopes if the terrain allows it. It is, in other words, an approximation of what a real chase through open country would look like, with the quarry or plastic bag changing direction unpredictably and the dog having to respond in real time. A Whippet that is blazingly fast on the straight, but loses the lure in the turns will score lower than a slightly slower dog that tracks the course perfectly and shows burning enthusiasm throughout. This is why lure coursing rewards the complete Whippet. Not just the fastest one, but the most athletically complete one. And here is something genuinely wonderful about lure coursing as it relates to Whippets specifically. The American Whippet Club notes that top lure coursing Whippets have come from almost every type of breeding program,
including dogs that were purchased as pets and dogs obtained through rescue. The instinct to chase a lure with great intensity is distributed so thoroughly throughout the Whippet gene pool that it doesn't particularly matter where the dog came from or what its show career looked like. A rescue Whippet with no papers and an unremarkable pedigree can step onto a lure coursing field for the first time and run with a ferocity and joy that takes your breath away because it is doing something its body and brain have been shaped for over centuries of selection. The drive is in all of them. The lure coursing community will also tell you, with the honesty of people who love their sport enough to be candid about its risks, that it is not without danger. Running at full speed through an open field, making sharp turns, competing with other dogs for a moving target. Injuries can happen. Muscle strains, toe injuries, occasionally something more serious if a dog hits a pulley or catches a bag at the wrong angle. Experienced lure coursing owners condition their dogs carefully, warm them up before running, read the ground conditions before entering, and muzzle their dogs in some circumstances to prevent injuries from diving at the lure too aggressively. This is a sport pursued by people who love their dogs enough to take the preparation seriously, and the culture around it reflects that. Then there is dock diving, which is the sport that produced what is possibly the most spectacular single Whippet achievement in recent memory. Because Whippets are not, on the face of it, obvious water dogs. They are thin-skinned, low body fat, cold-sensitive animals that most owners describe as having a strong preference for warmth and dry surfaces. And yet, there was a Whippet named Saunders who, at the same 2018 AKC National Championship where his breedmate Whiskey was winning Best in Show in the show ring, jumped 33 feet and 6 inches in the dock diving competition's open class elite division, unofficially breaking the world record. Video of the jump was submitted to Guinness headquarters for official recognition. A Whippet, who was presumably perfectly warm and dry 30 minutes earlier, curled up in a crate somewhere in the convention center, 33.5 feet through the air into a pool. The National Whippet Club of Canada notes, with what I imagine is considerable pride, that a Whippet was a long-time record holder in the Guinness Book of Records for dock diving. Beyond racing, lure coursing, and dock diving, Whippets compete in agility, flyball, rally obedience, scent work, barn hunt, and practically every other dog sport that exists. They have been titled in obedience competitions despite the independent-minded sighthound reputation that makes traditional obedience training challenging. They have been trained as therapy dogs visiting hospitals and care homes. They have served as psychiatric service dogs. One Whippet, Ashley Whippet, became famous in the 1970s as the founding dog of competitive canine frisbee catching, launching an entirely new sport from a single animal's extraordinary athleticism and its owner's willingness to take it to a football game and let it catch a disc on the field. The Whippet, it turns out, will try almost anything if you ask it nicely and make the activity feel sufficiently like a chase. What all these sports share, from the owner's perspective, is something that goes beyond competition and ribbons and titles. It is the particular pleasure of doing something with your dog that the dog actually loves doing. Not something you're asking it to perform for your benefit while it tolerates the request. Something it wants, genuinely and completely in its bones. Watching a Whippet run a lure course or launch itself off a dock or streak down a straight track is watching an animal in a state of complete fulfillment, doing precisely what it was designed to do, with every cell in its body in agreement about the direction of travel. There are dog people who will tell you that experiencing that, being the person who walked that dog onto that field, is one of the most purely joyful things they've ever done with an animal. We've talked about the Whippet in the show ring, the Whippet on the racetrack, the Whippet flying off a dock into a pool at speeds that apparently alarmed the Guinness Book of Records committee. Now let's come home, because one of the most genuinely surprising and frequently discussed aspects of this breed is what happens when you take all of that. The speed, the ancient prey drive, the sighthound independence, the athletic heritage, and put it inside an ordinary house, in an ordinary neighborhood, and ask it to just be a pet. What happens is that the Whippet turns out to be, improbably and delightfully, one of the most adaptable breeds in existence. This is the thing that catches people off guard. You would think, based purely on the description of a dog that can hit 35 miles per hour, that needs to run, that has a prey drive so deeply wired it overrides conscious training, that was bred for centuries as a working athlete, you would think that dog would require a specific kind of environment to thrive. A large property with a lot of outdoor space. An active owner who runs or hikes. A lifestyle built around the dog's physical needs. And while those things are certainly not unwelcome in a Whippet's life, the remarkable truth is that they are not actually required. Whippets live happily in New York City apartments. They live contentedly with elderly people who can't manage long walks. They thrive in rural farmhouses and in suburban terraced houses and in everything in between. They adapt to large families with children and to single people who live alone. They are excellent companions for people who
from home and surprisingly manageable for people who work longer hours, provided their exercise needs are met when the owner is available. The American Whippet Rescue Organization puts it beautifully when they say that a Whippet is company for a lonely senior citizen and a handicapped child, and goes to Little League games with his family, and stays home with a bedridden owner, and there is no single lifestyle that is necessary for a Whippet. They genuinely mean it. The key to understanding this adaptability is understanding the Whippet's exercise needs accurately rather than intuitively. Because the intuitive assumption, fast dog equals high energy equals constant exercise requirement, well, that's just wrong. Whippets are sprinters, not endurance athletes. Their entire cardiovascular and muscular system is optimized for short, explosive bursts of maximum effort, not for sustained activity over long periods. What a Whippet actually needs, in terms of exercise, is 2 or 3 opportunities per day to move at a reasonable pace on a leash, plus some regular access to a securely fenced area where it can sprint freely. Not marathon-length runs, not hours of continuous activity. A few explosive sprints of genuine speed, which might last all of 4 minutes combined, will tire a Whippet more completely and more satisfyingly than an hour of steady jogging. After those sprints, the dog is done. It has spent what it had to spend, and it is ready to go home and sleep for 4 hours. This is the origin of one of the breed's most beloved nicknames, the 45 miles per hour couch potato, which is a slight exaggeration of the speed. They top out around 35, but captures the spirit perfectly. The same animal that was a blur of pure velocity 20 minutes ago is now a loose, boneless arrangement of dog on your sofa, occupying approximately 1.5 times the space its actual body dimensions would suggest is possible, demonstrating a commitment to rest that is frankly inspirational. The practical implications of this are significant for people choosing a breed. A Whippet in an apartment, provided its owner commits to daily walks and a few weekly visits to a fenced dog park or tennis court for free running, can be perfectly content and perfectly well exercised. Its quiet indoor temperament. It rarely barks. It doesn't pace or whine restlessly. It doesn't demand constant entertainment. Makes it an unusually good neighbor in shared housing situations. Whippets are often described as having almost no doggy odor, a quality that their short single-layer coat contributes to, and they are notably clean in their habits in ways that owners coming from other breeds sometimes find startling. They also shed, but their short fine hair is much less of a domestic catastrophe than the shedding of a double-coated breed. You will find Whippet hair on your dark clothes. You will not find it blocking your vacuum cleaner or coating every surface in the house with a visible fur layer. One important caveat to the apartment-friendly picture: Whippets do not like being left alone for very long periods. This is a breed that forms deep, genuine attachments to its people and experiences genuine distress when those people are absent for too long. Separation anxiety is a real concern with Whippets, more so than with some more independent breeds. A Whippet that is regularly left alone for 8 or 9 hours will find ways to express its unhappiness, and those ways tend to involve chewing things it shouldn't, and a general escalating anxiety that isn't good for the dog's well-being. This is not a breed for people who want a dog they can leave alone all day and ignore until the evening. It is a breed for people who want a genuine companion animal, something that will be involved in their daily life and present in their emotional landscape. If that's what you're looking for, the Whippet will exceed your expectations. If it isn't, you should probably be looking at a more independent breed. The cold sensitivity issue is also worth addressing honestly, because it comes up constantly in Whippet ownership discussions, and it is genuinely real rather than owner coddling. A Whippet has a single-layer short coat, minimal body fat, and extremely thin skin. These 3 things combine to make cold weather a genuine physical discomfort rather than just a mild inconvenience. Whippets in cold climates need coats for outdoor exercise. Real coats, not decorative ones. And they should not be expected to sleep on cold floors or in unheated spaces. The dog coat industry, it should be noted, has embraced the Whippet community enthusiastically, and there is an extraordinary variety of well-designed, properly fitted, weather-appropriate coats available for the breed. Whippet owners in northern climates tend to have a coat wardrobe for their dogs that rivals their own, and they discuss the merits of different coat designs with the same seriousness they bring to discussing lure coursing technique or show ring presentation. This is not frivolous. It is genuinely the responsible management of a dog whose physical design was optimized for function, not for winter weather. The other side of the cold equation is warmth. Whippets love warmth the way some people love a good holiday. They will find the warmest spot in any room. The patch of floor where the afternoon sun falls, the corner closest to the radiator, the inside curve of someone's knees under a blanket. And they will occupy it with a completeness and a satisfaction that is very pleasant to witness. In a house with multiple Whippets, which is a situation many owners eventually arrive at because Whippet owners tend to use the phrase, "I can't have just one," with the re-signed air of someone who knew this would happen, the warm spots become the subject of a quiet, extremely dignified competition. No aggression, no loud disputes. Just a steady, subtle jockeying for position that results in a heap of dogs arranged in the warmest available configuration, each one apparently perfectly content with the outcome. Children and Whippets, when properly introduced, and when the children are old enough to understand gentle handling, tend to get on very well. The breed's gentleness and its non-aggressive nature make it safe around kids in a way that its athletic physique might not suggest. The main physical risk with children and Whippets is collision. A Whippet moving at full speed in a garden is not always paying close attention to the small humans in its path, and small children can get knocked over. But in terms of temperament, the Whippet has no mean streak. It doesn't snap, doesn't guard its resources aggressively, and tolerates the well-meaning but occasionally clumsy affection of children with considerable patience. Many Whippet owners describe their dogs as particularly gentle with children who are quiet and calm, as though the dog has assessed the situation and decided this small person deserves the same careful consideration it gives to everything. Let's step back from the domestic picture for a moment and spend some time with the Whippet's extended family, because the Sighthound group is one of the most fascinating collections of breeds in the entire dog world, and understanding who the Whippet's relatives are tells you a great deal about the long, extraordinary history of humans selecting dogs for speed and sight across wildly different cultures and landscapes over thousands of years. Think of the Sighthound group as a family reunion where everyone shares a strong family resemblance. That narrow head, that deep chest, those long legs, that distinctive tucked-up abdomen. But where the individual members have been shaped by completely different environments, different cultures, different prey animals, and different aesthetic sensibilities over centuries of parallel development. The Whippet sits at the center of this family, temperamentally and physically, but the branches that extend outward from that center point reach all the way to ancient Persia, to the Russian steppe, to the mountains of Afghanistan, to the open plains of Spain, to the highlands of Scotland, and to the palaces of pharaohs. Start with the Greyhound, because the Greyhound is the Whippet's most direct relative, and the breed most people reach for as a point of comparison. The Greyhound is larger, and is considered one of the oldest distinct breeds in the world. There are Greyhound-type skeletons from the 8th and 9th centuries discovered at an archaeological site in the Czech Republic that were found to be genetically almost identical to the modern Greyhound breed. The Greyhound is the only dog mentioned by name in the Bible, appearing in Proverbs as one of the 3 things that are stately in their stride. It is also the breed that has historically been most associated with commercial racing, and the story of retired racing greyhounds finding second lives as extraordinarily gentle, surprisingly lazy household pets is one of the more heartwarming recurring narratives in the dog rescue world. The Italian Greyhound is the smallest of the 3 closely related breeds and is much like the Whippet, but refined further toward delicacy and refinement. Roman mosaics, Renaissance paintings, and royal portraits across European history feature Italian greyhounds curled on the laps of queens and popes and emperors.
Then there is the Saluki, generally considered the Sighthound family's most ancient and most culturally significant member, with origins stretching back to ancient Mesopotamia, what is now Iraq and the surrounding region. Saluki-type remains have been found in Syria, dated to approximately 4,000 years before the present. Salukis appear in Egyptian art, in Persian poetry, in Chinese Ming Dynasty paintings, in Arab texts spanning 1,000 years. The Borzoi is the sighthound that the Russian czars built an entire aristocratic culture around. The Borzoi was developed in 16th century Russia by crossing Salukis and European sighthounds with thick-coated Russian breeds capable of withstanding brutal winters, and became the hunting dog of the Russian nobility, specifically for hunting wolves on the open steppe. After Russia's 1917 revolution, the breed nearly disappeared in Russia because of its association with the aristocracy. It survived primarily because specimens had been exported to Western Europe and America in the preceding decades, where it became fashionable among the wealthy as both a show dog and a companion. The Afghan Hound is the sighthound of Afghanistan, where it was developed by Afghan tribes for hunting in terrain so rugged and variable that the dog needed not just speed, but the agility to navigate rocky slopes and sudden drops. Its extraordinary thick, silky coat, which looks purely decorative to modern eyes, provided essential protection from cold mountain nights and rocky terrain. The Galgo Español, often called the Spanish Greyhound, is perhaps the most historically interesting of the Whippet's relatives in terms of the cultural context it comes from, and also the one with the most complicated and painful recent history.
The Galgo is an ancient breed, likely descended from Celtic sighthounds brought to the Iberian Peninsula in antiquity and possibly interbred with Salukis during the period of Arab occupation in medieval Spain. It was a dog of the Spanish nobility, protected by specific laws as early as the 9th century. Galgos have long, flat muscles suited to endurance, making them exceptional over longer distances. Tragically, in modern Spain, the Galgo is used extensively for hare coursing during hunting season and then frequently abandoned or killed at the end of the season, with estimates suggesting between 50,000 and 100,000 Galgos are discarded annually. The international rescue community for Galgos is active and passionate, and awareness of the breed's situation has grown considerably in recent years, but the problem remains serious. What all these breeds share, across their wildly different geographic origins and cultural histories, is that fundamental template. The body built for speed and sight, the independent mind shaped by centuries of hunting without close human direction, the explosive athleticism combined with surprising domestic gentleness, and the deep, particular bond with their specific people that sighthound owners describe as unlike anything they've experienced with other breeds. The Whippet, sitting in the middle of this ancient and global family, carries all of that history in a body that weighs 30 pounds and fits perfectly on your sofa. Regarding Whippet health compared to other pedigree dogs, the Whippet is in good shape. The Whippet's gene pool, while not enormous, has maintained sufficient diversity to avoid most expressions of inbreeding depression that occur when humans have bred selectively for particular features. The breed does have some predisposition towards certain eye conditions and cardiac issues. In addition, the sensitivity to anesthesia that is common across sighthounds because of their low body fat percentage and the way anesthetic drugs are metabolized in lean tissue requires that any veterinarian treating a Whippet be aware of the breed's specific needs in that regard. But overall, the Whippet is a healthy, robust, long-lived breed, typically reaching 12 to 15 years with good care. Now let's take a look at the small, frequently hilarious details of what it actually looks and feels and sounds like to share your home with a Whippet. Because Whippet owners, when you get them talking, are some of the most entertainingly specific people you will ever meet on the subject of their dogs. They have opinions about blanket types and bed configurations and the precise geometry of how a Whippet fits itself into a sofa corner. They have stories. They have a shared vocabulary of experiences that functions almost like a dialect. You say the word zoomies to a Whippet owner, and they will immediately know exactly what you mean and probably have a story about a lamp. So let's start with the zoomies, because no discussion of living with a Whippet is complete without them. The zoomies are something most dogs do occasionally, but Whippets have elevated the zoomies to an art form. A Whippet experiencing a zoomie episode will suddenly, with absolutely no warning and no discernible trigger, launch itself from wherever it is resting and begin running at full speed in tight circles or figure eights around whatever space is available. Indoors, this means ricocheting off sofas, banking off walls, vaulting over coffee tables, and covering the entire floor plan of the house at approximately 30 miles per hour with an expression of pure, incandescent joy. The episode lasts between 30 seconds and 2 minutes. Then the dog stops, as abruptly as it started, and returns to its resting spot with the same serene expression it had before any of this happened, as though nothing unusual had occurred, and you were the strange one for standing there looking startled. Whippet owners learn that attempting to interrupt a zoomie is both futile and mildly dangerous, because a Whippet at full speed in a confined space is making spatial calculations at a rate that leaves no bandwidth for responding to human instructions. The best approach is to stand back, appreciate the spectacle, and wait for it to pass. And it is a spectacle. Even people who have owned Whippets for years report that the zoomies never quite lose their capacity to be simultaneously alarming and absolutely wonderful. The sleeping arrangements in a Whippet household deserve their own discussion because they evolve over time in a very predictable direction. It typically begins with firm intentions about where the dog will sleep, a dog bed in the kitchen, perhaps, or a crate in the bedroom. And it ends, within a few weeks, with the dog on the bed. This is not because Whippet owners are weak-willed, although Whippet owners will cheerfully admit that maintaining rules with these dogs requires a specific kind of resolve that not everyone has. It is because Whippets are cold, they are thin, they feel hard surfaces as genuinely uncomfortable, and they are very good at finding the warmest available location, which in most houses is next to a sleeping human under a duvet. The dog that arrives at your bedside at 2 a.m. and stands there looking at you with large, luminous eyes in the dark is not being manipulative. It is being cold and logical. The duvet is warm. You are under the duvet. The mathematics are not complicated. Once a Whippet has been admitted to the bed, it will demonstrate the specific spatial skill that all Whippet owners know intimately. the ability to occupy a disproportionate amount of bed relative to its physical dimensions. A 30-pound Whippet can, through the application of strategic positioning and a complete willingness to be absolutely motionless once established, effectively colonize 3/4 of a double bed. This happens gradually. You go to sleep with the dog curled at the foot of the bed. You wake up with the dog pressed against your back, your legs pushed to one edge, and the dog's head on the pillow next to yours. The dog did not move aggressively or push you. It simply made a series of incremental repositioning decisions throughout the night, each one individually minor, the cumulative effect of which is that it now has the better half of the bed, and you are grateful it isn't raining because you could probably sleep in the garden. Households with multiple Whippets. And as I mentioned, one tends to become 2 or 3 because the breed is genuinely addictive. Develop their own particular ecosystem of sleeping arrangements. Whippets in groups tend to pile together for warmth, and the pile has a hierarchy that is apparent to other Whippets and completely invisible to humans. The dog at the center of the pile, surrounded on all sides by warm dog bodies, has clearly won something, though what exactly it has won and how it won it is not obvious to outside observers. The dogs rearrange themselves with the efficiency of a system that has been running for a long time and knows exactly what it's doing, and the humans just provide the warm surfaces and try not to disturb the configuration. In the kitchen, Whippets are bold. This is the polite way of saying that they are counterculture opportunists who combine athletic ability with strategic patience in ways that can leave you standing there, holding an empty plate and trying to reconstruct exactly how it happened. A Whippet can reach a kitchen counter with minimal effort. The front feet go up, the long neck extends, and suddenly things that were behind what you thought was a safe perimeter are being assessed for edibility. And then they carry whatever they've obtained to another location and deal with it there, which is how you end up finding a stick of butter under the sofa or a raw potato in the garden. They are also, it should be said, deeply funny in their reactions to novel stimuli. A Whippet encountering something unexpected, an unusual object on the floor, a person wearing a large hat, a reflection in an unfamiliar mirror, will approach it with a particular combination of curiosity and theatrical caution that is entirely endearing. The neck extends. The weight shifts slightly backward. The ears go up. The dog advances half a step and then retreats the same half step and looks at you as if to confirm that yes, this thing is here, and yes, it is your responsibility to explain it. This specific expression, intelligent, alert, faintly accusatory, is one of the most recognizable things about the breed, and one of the things its owners love most deeply. And underneath all of this, the zoomies and the bed theft and the counter surfing and the theatrical caution about hats, there is that fundamental quality of companionship that Whippet owners return to again and again when they try to explain why this particular breed gets so completely under your skin. The Whippet chooses to be near you. It watches you with genuine attention and responds to your moods with a sensitivity that can feel, on a quiet evening, remarkably close to understanding. It is warm and real and particular, and it fits against you on the sofa with the ease of something that has always been there, and it looks up at you sometimes with those large, dark, luminous eyes, and there is an expression in them that is very difficult to describe and very easy to feel. We haven't looked at all of the sighthound breeds, but please know that all of them are expressions of the same fundamental idea that the Whippet also expresses. The idea that a dog built for speed and sight, shaped by the specific demands of the terrain and prey and culture it was developed in, is one of the most elegant solutions that the long partnership between humans and dogs has ever produced. Each of these breeds is a different answer to the same question. How do you make the fastest, most efficient, most beautiful hunting dog possible for this specific place and these specific conditions? And the answers, taken together, form a portrait of human ingenuity and aesthetic ambition across thousands of years and dozens of cultures that is, when you step back and look at it whole, genuinely remarkable. Let's take a quick look at the Whippet world. And I use that phrase deliberately, because it really is a world, with its own culture and vocabulary and gathering places and passionate internal debates. It is one of the more interesting subcultures in the broader universe of dog ownership, and understanding it tells you a great deal about what the breed does to the people who fall in love with it. Whippet people, as a general category, tend to share certain characteristics that are easy to identify once you've spent any time among them. They are almost universally enthusiastic in a way that stops just short of evangelical. They will tell you about their dog with a specificity and warmth that suggests they have been thinking about how to explain this particular animal to an outsider and have finally, gratefully, found someone willing to listen. They use phrases like, "You can't have just one," with the resigned affection of someone who has already proven their own prediction correct. And they have opinions. Detailed, carefully considered, sometimes fiercely held opinions about everything from the correct way to fit a sighthound collar to the apparently inexhaustible question of whether show-bred whippets and race-bred whippets represent a single unified breed or two increasingly divergent populations that happen to share a name. The breeders who are most admired in the Whippet community tend to be the ones who successfully navigate both worlds, who produce dogs that win in the conformation ring and can also run a lure course with genuine ability, who understand that the breed standard is a functional document as much as an aesthetic one, and who breed with one eye on the dog they're producing today and another on the breed. They'll be leaving behind for the next generation. This long-term thinking, this sense of stewardship across time, is something you encounter constantly in serious Whippet breeding circles, and it reflects a genuine understanding that a breed is not a product, but a living, evolving population of animals whose health and character depend on the accumulated decisions of everyone who has ever bred them. The rescue community within the Whippet world is also worth talking about, because it is active, organized, and motivated by exactly the same depth of feeling about the breed that drives the show and racing communities. Whippet rescue organizations operate in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and numerous other countries, and they range from small regional operations run by a handful of dedicated volunteers to more formal organizations with established networks of foster homes, veterinary partnerships, and adoption processes. Rescue organizations throughout the world have rehomed thousands of Whippets over the years, and their experience with the breed gives them a particular perspective that is worth listening to. What rescue workers consistently say about Whippets is that they are one of the more resilient breeds when it comes to rehoming. A Whippet that has had a difficult start, surrendered, neglected, or simply placed in a home that wasn't the right fit, tends to adapt to a new situation with a readiness that can be touching. These are not dogs that nurse grudges or carry lasting behavioral damage from past difficulties in the way that some breeds might. They assess their new environment, they identify their people, and within a relatively short period they are doing what Whippets do. Finding the warmest spot, pressing against your leg on the sofa, watching you with those large, calm eyes in a way that suggests they have decided this is where they belong now, and they are completely fine with that. The transition is rarely seamless, and rescue dogs always benefit from patience and consistency, but the underlying temperament that makes the breed so adaptable in life generally also makes it adaptable in rehoming specifically. The Whippet's growing popularity is also worth noting, because the breed has been on a steady upward trajectory in registration numbers and public awareness for the past couple of decades. In the United Kingdom, the Whippet is one of the most popular breeds in the hound group, with 11 breed clubs operating across the country. A number that reflects both the depth of the community and the geographic breadth of the breed's following. In Scandinavia, the Whippet has a particularly devoted following, with strong show and lure coursing communities in Sweden, Norway, and Finland. In Australia and New Zealand, the breed is well established across both the show and the sport communities. This global spread of a breed that started as the poor man's racehorse in the back streets of northern England is one of those genuinely satisfying stories in dog breed history. The story of something that was created by ordinary people for entirely practical reasons, and that turned out, through the accumulated quality of its character and the elegance of its design, to be something that people all over the world wanted to keep close. Part of the attraction of Whippets is the physical quality of the dog. The way it feels to have a Whippet leaning against you is unlike having most other dogs leaning against you, because the Whippet is all muscle and warmth under that thin, velvety coat, and it settles its weight against you with a trusting completeness that is deeply pleasant. Part of it is the eye contact. Whippets maintain eye contact with their people in a way that feels less like animal watchfulness and more like genuine attention. They are looking at you, specifically and continuously, in a way that holds your attention in return. And part of it is the combination of qualities that seems, on paper, contradictory, but in practice feels perfectly coherent. The independence and the attachment, the explosive speed and the profound stillness, the ancient hunting drive and the domestic gentleness, all present in the same animal, all somehow reconciled in a way that makes the dog feel, to the people who love it, like a complete and fully realized thing. And what about the Whippet's relationship with other dogs? You might expect a dog with such a strong prey drive, such deeply wired predatory behavior, to be difficult or combative with other dogs. In practice, Whippets are almost universally described as excellent with other dogs, sociable, playful, non-confrontational, and particularly easy with other sighthounds, with whom they seem to share a kind of mutual recognition that goes beyond simple breed familiarity. Whippets play in a distinctive way that can alarm the uninitiated. They chase each other at speed, with what looks, from a distance, like alarming ferocity. Mouths open, bodies colliding, sudden explosive direction changes, a general atmosphere of mayhem. This is normal Whippet play, and it is genuinely joyful rather than dangerous. Sighthounds play by running, and running fast, and chasing each other, because that is the physical vocabulary their bodies are built for, and the activity their brains find most rewarding. A group of Whippets given space to run together is one of the most purely exhilarating things to watch in the dog world. A moving, shifting demonstration of speed and agility and cooperative play that looks choreographed but is entirely spontaneous. What they don't do, in the vast majority of cases, is fight. There are, of course, exceptions, but in general, Whippets are not resource guarders. They are not territorially aggressive. They don't posture and intimidate the way some breeds do. When a Whippet has a disagreement with another dog, which happens occasionally because dogs are individuals and individuals sometimes don't get along, the Whippet's preferred resolution is to simply leave, to walk away, to create distance, to remove itself from the situation rather than escalate it. This conflict avoidance tendency is so consistent across the breed that it is considered a characteristic trait, and it makes Whippets particularly easy to manage in multi-dog households and dog park environments. The relationship between Whippets and cats is more nuanced and deserves honest treatment rather than the optimistic gloss that some breed profiles apply to it. The prey drive is real. A Whippet that has been raised with cats from puppyhood, in a home where the cats are confident and have safe spaces and don't run, can absolutely coexist peacefully with those cats for its entire life. But a Whippet introduced to an unfamiliar cat as an adult, or a Whippet in any situation where the cat panics and runs, is a different calculation. The running triggers the chase sequence. It doesn't matter how well trained the dog is or how gentle its general temperament. The cat runs, the Whippet chases, and at 35 miles per hour, the outcome of that chase is not in doubt. Responsible Whippet ownership means understanding this honestly and managing the environment accordingly, not assuming that good behavior in one context guarantees good behavior in all contexts, and not setting either animal up for a situation that could end badly. Now I want to spend a moment on something that comes up in virtually every serious discussion of the Whippet, which is the question of whether this breed is right for a first-time dog owner. Because the honest answer is both yes and no, depending entirely on what kind of first-time dog owner you are. The reasons someone might say no to that question are the reasons we've already covered. The prey drive that cannot be trained away. The recall that doesn't work at full speed. The fence requirement that is non-negotiable. The separation anxiety that makes long alone periods genuinely problematic. The sensitivity to cold that requires active management. The reasons someone might say yes are equally compelling. The Whippet's gentle temperament makes it forgiving of the inevitable mistakes of new ownership in a way that more dominant or reactive breeds are not. Its cleanliness and minimal odor and minimal shedding make the practical aspects of keeping it straightforward. Its quiet indoor temperament means it doesn't create the noise and chaos that can overwhelm new owners of high-energy working breeds. And its deep affection for its people means that the bond it forms with a first-time owner is real and strong and reciprocal, which is perhaps the most important thing about keeping any dog, that the relationship is genuine, that both parties are getting something from it, that there is actual love moving in both directions. The Whippet asks of its owner a certain kind of attentiveness to its physical needs, to its emotional sensitivity, to the management of its environment around the prey drive, and it rewards that attentiveness with a quality of companionship that experienced Whippet owners consistently describe as unmatched. That seems like a fair exchange. It seems, in fact, like a rather good deal. We are getting close to the end of tonight's journey, and before we arrive at the final section, I want to spend some time on something that feels important and that runs underneath everything we've discussed so far, like a quiet current. It's the question of what the Whippet story actually tells us, not just about this one breed, or about dogs generally, but about the long, strange, productive, sometimes exploitative, often beautiful relationship between human beings and the animals they have shaped and been shaped by in return. Because the Whippet's history is, at its core, a story about what people want. And and what people want turns out to be more complicated and more interesting than it might initially appear. The miners and mill workers of Victorian Northern England wanted something specific and practical. They wanted a dog fast enough to win races and catch rabbits, small enough to feed on modest means, gentle enough to live in a house with children. They weren't thinking about aesthetics in any formal sense. They weren't thinking about breed standards or kennel club recognition or the judgment of posterity. They were thinking about Saturday afternoons, about the pleasure of watching something they had bred with their own hands run faster than anyone else's dog, about the small but real satisfaction of supplementing the family's food with rabbits caught by an animal they had trained and loved. The Whippet they created was entirely a function of those wants, and it was, on its own terms, exactly right. Then the upper-class dog fanciers arrived, and they wanted something different. They wanted elegance. They wanted a dog that could stand in a show ring and be evaluated against an ideal. A dog that represented the aesthetic vision of what a small sighthound at the peak of its physical development should look like. They refined the Whippet, added Italian Greyhound blood, selected for particular proportions and flowing curves in that characteristic silhouette. And in doing so, they preserved the breed in a form that could be standardized and documented and passed on across generations with some consistency. The Whippet they refined was also, on its own terms, exactly right, and the fact that it was built on the foundation of the working dog rather than invented from scratch meant that the refinement never entirely separated the show dog from the working animal underneath. And then the breed crossed an ocean, and working people in Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and Ohio recognized in it something familiar. A fast dog, a tough dog, a dog for people who didn't have a lot but wanted the best. And they took it up and raced it and kept it and passed it on, and it became part of the fabric of American dog culture in a way that was entirely consistent with how it had become. Part of the fabric of English dog culture decades earlier. The Whippet seems to do this wherever it goes. It finds its people. And its people, whoever they are and wherever they live, tend to feel that it found them specifically. What strikes me, thinking about all of this, is the continuity. The Whippet that Whiskey descended from, the one that Justin Smithy bred next to his bed in Georgia and walked into the biggest show in the country and won. That dog is connected by an unbroken line of deliberate human choice back to the coal mining communities of County Durham and Lancashire. Every breeding decision made along that line, every individual dog selected, and every individual dog passed over, every generation of owners who looked at their Whippet and decided it was worth preserving and improving and passing on. All of that accumulated decision-making is present in whiskey, in bourbon. In every Whippet currently asleep on a sofa somewhere, legs twitching in a dream that probably involves a very fast rabbit. The continuity goes further back still, of course. The sighthound body plan that the Whippet expresses is not an invention of Victorian England. It is an ancient solution to an ancient problem. How do you catch fast prey on open ground? That humans were applying, in different landscapes and different cultures, thousands of years before anyone in County Durham thought about crossing a small greyhound with a terrier. The dogs in the Egyptian tomb paintings were expressions of that same solution, shaped by Egyptian hunters working Egyptian terrain for Egyptian purposes, and the Saluki was an expression of it shaped by Arabian nomads, and the Galgo was an expression shaped by the peoples of the Iberian Peninsula, and the Borzoi was shaped by Russian aristocrats who needed to hunt wolves on the steppe. The Whippet is the latest chapter in a story that is at least 4,000 years old and probably considerably older, and it carries all of that history in its structure without knowing it, the way any living thing carries its evolutionary history without knowing it. There is also something worth saying about what the Whippet gives back. We talk about what owners want from dogs, what the breed was created to do, what needs it serves. The racing, the coursing, the companionship, the therapy work. But dogs are not passive recipients of human intention. They are active participants in the relationship, and the Whippet participates with a particular quality of engagement that its owners find consistently and deeply transformative. People who come to the Whippet from other breeds often describe a feeling of recalibration, of having their assumptions about what a dog is and what a dog can offer gently but thoroughly revised. The Whippet's combination of physical magnificence and emotional intimacy, its capacity to be both a creature of pure speed and a creature of pure domestic warmth, its way of being completely itself in every situation without apology or performance. These qualities produce in the people who live closely with it a particular kind of attentiveness. You find yourself noticing things you didn't notice before. The specific way the dog arranges its limbs when it settles. The exact quality of its attention when it watches you across a room. The sound of its breathing in the dark. The way it moves moves through the world with a combination of speed and grace that is, when you see it at full expression on an open field, something close to breathtaking. Whippet owners will also tell you, if you ask them honestly, that the breed teaches you something about accepting a creature on its own terms rather than the terms you might have preferred. You cannot make a Whippet into a dog with reliable off-leash recall in open country. You cannot make it not cold-sensitive, not prone to taking the best spot on the bed, not entirely single-minded when a squirrel makes the tactical error of running across its line of sight. These are not flaws to be corrected. They are the dog. They are the 4,000 years of selection speaking, the ancient hunting drive intact, in a modern body, in a modern home, and the most honest and rewarding relationship with a Whippet is the one that accepts all of it, the speed and the stillness, the independence and the attachment, the prey drive and the profound gentleness, as a complete and coherent whole. There is a quote that circulates in the Whippet community, attributed variously, and probably not traceable to any single precise origin, that says something to the effect that Whippets are not the right dog for everyone, but they are the only dog for some. The people in that second category, the ones for whom the Whippet is the only dog, tend to know it early. They meet one at a friend's house or at a show or on a walk in the park, and something clicks into place. Some recognition happens. The dog looks at them with those large, dark, calm eyes, and they look back, and something passes between them that is not exactly explicable but is absolutely real. And then, typically within a fairly short time, they have a Whippet. And within a slightly longer time, they might have two. And they start going to lure coursing events, or they enter a show, or they sign up for racing, or they simply spend evenings on a sofa with a warm dog pressed against them and feel, in a way they may not have anticipated, that something in their life has been completed. That a space they didn't know was empty has been quietly, precisely, and permanently filled. That continuity of attachment across centuries and cultures and classes is perhaps the most remarkable thing about the breed. Not the speed, extraordinary as that is. Not the Joe Ring record, impressive as that is. Not the genetics, fascinating as that is. The most remarkable thing is simply that people have always found a way to love this particular dog, and the dog has always found a way to deserve it. And so here we are at the end, which is also, in the way that good endings tend to be, a kind of beginning. Because the Whippet story isn't finished. It is happening right now, tonight, in hundreds of thousands of homes across the world, on sofas and in dog beds, and in the dark warmth of bedrooms where a thin-skinned, cold-sensitive, profoundly affectionate animal has claimed the warmest available position and is breathing slowly in the particular way that sleeping dogs breathe, and the person next to them can hear it and finds it comforting. It is happening on lure coursing fields where the season is just beginning, where handlers are walking their dogs through early morning dew to warm up their muscles before the first run of the day, and where someone is about to witness their Whippet do something at full speed that will stop their breath for a moment and then make them laugh out loud from sheer pleasure. It is happening in show rings where judges are moving carefully around a dog that is standing with the particular composed stillness of an animal that knows it is being looked at and is comfortable with that. Its silhouette, those flowing curves that have been considered beautiful for 150 years of formal evaluation and considerably longer in the informal aesthetic judgment of everyone who has ever watched a sighthound move. It is happening in rescue operations where a Whippet that came in thin and uncertain last month is now, 6 weeks into a foster home, pressing against its foster person's leg on the sofa with that long, slow exhale of complete trust, the one that says, "I have decided this is safe. I have decided you are mine. I am staying." And the foster person, who said firmly at the beginning that they were not keeping this dog, is looking at their phone composing a message to the rescue coordinator that begins with the words "so about the adoption paperwork." The Whippet's speed, that 35 miles per hour that we've mentioned numerous times and that still, every time, seems like something that shouldn't be possible in a dog you could pick up with one arm, is worth one final appreciation. A Whippet covering the ground at full gallop uses a double suspension rotary gait, which means there are 2 moments in each stride cycle where all 4 feet are off the ground simultaneously. At full speed, the dog's body becomes briefly, completely airborne twice per stride. A moment of pure suspension, pure flight, the animal temporarily released from contact with the earth. It is this quality, this brief repeated levitation, that gives the Whippet in motion its characteristic floating quality. The sense that it is moving slightly faster than gravity is comfortable with. Wildlife photographers and dog sport photographers talk about the particular challenge and particular reward of photographing a Whippet at full stretch. The way the body at that moment of suspension is in perfect, extended balance. intense, every line clean and purposeful, the whole thing expressing velocity without blur, speed made briefly still in an image. There is also the matter of Ashley Whippet, the founding dog of competitive canine frisbee catching, who deserves a proper send-off, having been mentioned briefly earlier. Ashley Whippet was a Whippet who belonged to Alex Stein, a college student in Ohio in the 1970s, and who was brought to a nationally televised baseball game at Dodger Stadium in 1974 by Stein, who jumped the fence and ran onto the field during a game between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Cincinnati Reds, letting Ashley demonstrate an extraordinary ability to leap and catch a flying disc. The game was briefly stopped. The crowd, reportedly, loved it. The television commentators struggled to maintain their composure. Stein was eventually escorted off the field by security, but not before Ashley had demonstrated, on national television, an entirely new athletic possibility for dogs. Leaping, twisting, catching, the combination of speed and coordination and aerial awareness that the Whippet's particular body makes possible. The competitive canine frisbee world that grew from that unauthorized Dodger Stadium demonstration now involves thousands of dogs and handlers competing in organized events worldwide. It began with a Whippet jumping a fence she was not supposed to jump and doing something magnificent on a baseball field, which is, when you think about it, a very Whippet origin story. There is also the simple daily life with a Whippet that no amount of breed description fully captures. The specific weight of the dog against you, the particular sound it makes when it dreams, the way it greets you with a whole body happiness that is disproportionate to how long you were gone and is entirely genuine. These things exist in the actual living of it, not in the describing of it, and the only way to fully know them is to find yourself a Whippet and let it claim you, which I suspect at least some of you listening tonight are now considerably more likely to do than you were 90 minutes ago. That is the Whippet. All of it, from the Egyptian tomb paintings to the Westminster show ring to the sofa. One animal, all of those things at once, 4,000 years and 35 miles per hour, distilled into 30 pounds of warmth and grace and breathtaking speed and absolute, particular, irreplaceable love. If you've made it all the way here and you're still with me, whether you're drifting or still listening, I am so genuinely glad you came along for this one. The Whippet deserved the full treatment, and I hope it got something close to it tonight. If you have a Whippet of your own, tell me about them in the comments. Their name, where you are, what they're doing right now. I would genuinely love to know. And if tonight's story has made you want one, well, don't say I didn't warn you about the sofa. If you enjoy what I make here, a like and a subscribe means more than you know. It helps other people find these videos, which means more people getting to drift off to stories about Victorian coal miners and dock diving world records and dogs that can fly, briefly, twice per stride, in the dark. And if you've been here before, welcome back, and thank you for staying. Sleep well tonight. You're in good company.